Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning into O'Connor and Company. It is 7:06 on a busy and very foggy Tuesday morning. Be careful driving out there. Jamie Whitten, she'll keep you updated on all the roads, but do be careful. We want you to get to work safely. Coming up at 7:35, Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. He'll give us an update on this Luigi Maggione arrest. A strange story there and other legal topics. At 8:05, Susan Ferricchio of the Washington Times. She'll give us the latest on Trump's cabinet picks. I'm Julie Gunlock, sitting in for Larry alongside Hans von Spakovsky. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning, Julie. We're halfway done, but the best is yet to come.
That's right, because right now joining us is Cully Stimson, your colleague over at the Heritage Foundation. Cully, great to talk to you today.
Great to be with both of you. Thanks.
Oh, look, jurors cleared Daniel Penny of criminal negligent homicide yesterday, but there was concern that that wouldn't happen. What was your reaction?
I was relieved that the jury saw through the non-evidence and inflamed passions and just rendered a verdict based on the law. Look, the criminally negligent homicide under New York statute requires the defendant to either be reckless, inattentive, or careless. And when the government itself dismisses the manslaughter in the second degree, the upper charge, I think the jury saw what was going on and rendered a verdict based on the facts. So I think all jury verdicts should be respected. Whether you agree with them or not is different. But I thought this was a proper verdict.
Yeah, Cully, I was glad to see the verdict too, particularly because it seemed that Alvin Bragg and his assistant DA, they were trying to make this a racial case. They were trying to, I think, bias the jury in finding against Penny because he's white, and the guy who started this all, who walked into the subway car, apparently was African American, and they tried to make it a racial thing.
Well, there's two facts to think about in that regard, Hans. First is, if they thought this was a hate crime, they could have charged the hate crime enhancement, saying that a white person was perpetrating a crime against a black person because he was black. They didn't do that. Right. He was not indicted with a hate crime, number one. Number two, the prosecutor in court several times in the last few days mentioned the race of the decedent. There is no place at all, when it's not a hate crime, for a prosecutor to be mentioning that in front of the jury. And so, as you know, we wrote this book, Rogue Prosecutors, and one of our chapters is dedicated to Alvin Bragg. And we say in that chapter that he views the criminal justice system through race-colored glasses. And unfortunately, that's true of him and others like him. So I'm happy that the verdict came out the way it did. I thought that Bragg and his prosecutors and the judge made numerous mistakes that were reversible on appeal had he been convicted.
Yeah, it's too bad he didn't spend his time on prosecuting the real crimes going on in New York City. I know in your chapter you talk about all the felonies that he refuses to prosecute and other felonies, right, that he downgrades to misdemeanors, which has led to the spike in crime in New York City, right?
That's right. That's right. I mean, there's a huge population in New York, and so as a percentage, the crime rate is low for a huge city, but it's still unacceptably high, and that's because he willingly, like these other rogue prosecutors, has his prosecutors water down felonies to misdemeanors, and he sent out a memo to all his prosecutors on day one to do just that. So I'm glad justice prevailed here. I hope that the people who are angry about this verdict don't seek retribution, which they promised to do in their news conferences yesterday. That would be a big mistake.
Yeah, and we probably have some follow-up on that, but really quickly want to go back to the jury and ask a question about that, because on Twitter and other social media platforms, we're seeing some chatter from the left saying, oh, this was a racist jury. This was, they let him go because he was white. Tell us the makeup of this jury. Do you know?
I do. Several black people were on that jury, including men and women. And so I'm afraid that criticism just doesn't ring true in this case.
Yeah.
Well, Cully, Alvin Bragg, as we all know, unfortunately now, is another one of these Soros-supported rogue prosecutors that you've written about. Of the ones who've gotten elected, is he one of the few remaining? How many of these rogue prosecutors have now lost their offices because of people finally realizing that what they're doing is bad?
Well, of the 2,300 elected DAs around the country, Hans, about 70 are Soros rogue prosecutors. And the household names that have lost office are Gascon in L.A., Kim Foxx in Chicago, Kim Gardner in St. Louis, Marilyn Mosby in Baltimore, Rachel Rollins in Boston, and, of course, Monique Worrell and Andrew Warren down in Florida because DeSantis booted them. And the only two that remain in our book that are prominent household names are Larry Krasner in Philadelphia, who the criminals call Uncle Larry, and then Alvin Bragg. But there's about 60 more. You have Steve Descano here in Fairfax. You have the Arlington County Commonwealth's attorney, but they're guppies compared to the really big ones who are really, really pro-criminal, anti-victim, cop-hating zealots.
There are calls for Bragg to resign sort of because of this case. I love how they're calling him to resign just because of this case, as if he hasn't done so much damage aside from this case. But have you seen any response from Bragg, or do you know anything about, I mean, does he take these calls seriously, or is he going to stay in place?
I've never had the pleasure of meeting him. I suspect he won't resign on his own accord. Now, under New York law, the governor does have the ability, like the governor in Florida, to remove an elected DA for misfeasance of office. And so I doubt Kathy Hochul, the governor of New York, will do that, but she could.
What about the money that Soros had been pouring in? I mean, all of these prosecutors, one of the big reasons they got elected is because Soros and his folks were pouring huge amounts of money into these DA races, money that in the past, we just never saw that kind being spent. Are they still doing that? In other words, is this still an ongoing effort to try to get even more of these prosecutors elected in various places around the country?
Yep, they are doing that. In our book, we note about $40 to $50 million in direct campaign spending, Hans, and about $1 billion with a B in indirect campaign spending. He didn't put any money this time in the Gascon race, and of course Gascon lost. Larry Krasner got over $1 million in both of his races directly from Soros-related political action committees. And remember, this isn't me making this up. This isn't a heritage book. This is us quoting them. And so George Soros took to the pages of the Wall Street Journal on July 31st, 2022, with an op-ed saying why I support reform-minded prosecutors. So they're admitting, and of course the campaign finance state-level paperwork shows you what they're spending. So they're doing it, and they're doubling down, and his son Alex has taken over, and he said he's more political than his daddy.
Oh, dear. Okay, this isn't over for Daniel Penny. He is now being sued by the father of Jordan Neely. Of course, this man had no presence in Jordan Neely's life up to his death. Do you have any predictions for this? Will this move forward?
I suspect that it will go forward, and the same evidence you saw in the criminal trial will be adduced for the most part in the civil suit, and the standard of proof is lower in civil cases, of course. And so I don't know how it's going to turn out, but they will try to hold him civilly liable for the death of their son.
Listen, Cully, thanks so much for coming on. This is very helpful, and appreciate your information this morning.
Well, thanks for putting up with Hans today. Get some combat pay.
He's been great. We continue in just a moment. First, well, it looks like some of Trump's nominees are gaining momentum. The nominees are up on Capitol Hill this week, making their pitch, making their rounds, meeting with different members. Byron York is suggesting Pete Hegseth's nomination is turning a corner. I certainly feel that. There seems to be less opposition left. Boy, he's been through the ringer. But that seems to be dying down a little bit. Would you agree?
Well, yeah. In fact, there's stories out there that Senator Joni Ernst, who apparently the rumors were that she was going to oppose his nomination, she's now putting out statements saying that she's probably going to support his nomination.
Yeah, that was a really interesting turnaround, Joni Ernst.
Well, yeah, wasn't it?
Yes, it really was. Joni Ernst was sort of leading the opposition to him and aggressively. And there were some, theories. Did she want the job herself? She obviously has military background. Was she sort of signaling that she wanted him defeated for her own ambitious purposes? So that was kind of an interesting thing to watch. Christopher Bedford wrote on Twitter, "It's hard to overstate what an incredibly unforced and damaging miscalculation Ernst made when she went at the popularly elected incoming president and head of her party. She might lose her job. There are some theories that she might have a primary challenge because of this, Hans."
Well, she probably was unhappy over the fact that, and I think actually I recall Larry talking about this, that her stated opposition was bringing to the public attention the fact that apparently in past events she has been big on supporting DEI in the military, transgenders in the military, things that I don't think would go down very well in her home state if members of the public realize that.
Yeah. Let's listen to her sort of back and forth here. This was her opposing Pete Hegseth, cut 17.
Okay, it doesn't sound on your answer that you've gotten to a yes. If I'm wrong about that, correct me. And if that is the case, it sounds to me as if the hearing will be critical for his nomination. Am I right about that?
I think you are right. I think for a number of our senators, they want to make sure that any allegations have been cleared, and that's why we have to have a very thorough vetting process. And that's why I was happy to sit down with Pete and have that conversation with him yesterday. So again, all I will say at this time is that we did have a very thorough discussion over a number of those issues, and the vetting will continue, I am certain, through the next month or so until we approach that hearing date.
And let's hear what she had to say yesterday after she had another meeting with Hegseth.
It was a very good meeting. The more you spend, I've known her for 10 years. The more we talk, the more we're reminded of as two combat veterans.
I'm sorry, that was Hegseth saying he had another very good meeting. And then Ernst issued a statement. I appreciate Pete Hegseth's responsiveness and respect for the process. Following our encouraging conversation, Pete committed to completing a full audit of the Pentagon and selecting. Anyway, she has basically said, it's a long statement, but she has basically said that she's now supporting Pete Hegseth.
Well, presidents should have the prerogative of choosing the people that they want to have, and unless someone can show that there is a really serious issue with someone, I think the Senate should confirm a president's choices, even if they think perhaps they don't like the policies. That's not the issue.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. One theory is I think that this Hegseth dust-up has really helped Kash Patel and possibly Tulsi Gabbard, because they are saying that opposition to Trump's very reasonable, very good appointees, it really doesn't help them. We'll talk more about this with Susan Ferricchio of the Washington Times. It's 7:22. All right, more on Trump's cabinet nominees. Joni Ernst tweeting out yesterday that she met with Tulsi Gabbard, gave her sort of a good review. She said, wonderful catching up with Tulsi Gabbard, a strong and proven leader. So that's a rather good review coming from Joni Ernst. Bit of a tone change there.
Yeah, sure.
For the senator. Also, Kash Patel is making the rounds, meetings with senators on Capitol Hill this week. He also had a fine meeting with Senator Ernst. She tweeted, Kash Patel will create much-needed transparency at the FBI. He shares my passion for shaking up federal agencies, downsizing the D.C. bureaucracy, and having public servants work on behalf of the American people. So I would say an endorsement from Senator Ernst.
No, it sounds like it. And look, I mean, think about his great background to be the head of the FBI. He was a federal public defender. Then he was a lawyer in the National Security Division of the Justice Department. Then he moved over to the House Intelligence Committee and helped do the investigation of what the FBI's abuse of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, something that both the Inspector General of DOJ and others have found was a real problem. So if anybody knows how to clean up the FBI, that kind of background
Absolutely.
gives it to him.
Yeah, also had great meetings with Chuck Grassley and Mike Lee and Shelley Moore Capito. It's looking pretty good for Cash. I'm real happy to see that. We will, again, talk to Susan Ferriccio at 8:05, so keep it here. We've got more right here on WMAL. It's 7:29.
WMAL FM, Woodbridge, Washington, a Cumulus media station.
Making sense of the news.
News Talk 105.9.
News now. Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
Good morning. Thanks for tuning in to O'Connor and Company. It's 7:37 on a busy, very foggy Tuesday morning. Be sure to be careful on the roads. Coming up at 8:05, Susan Ferriccio at the Washington Times. She'll give us the latest on Trump's cabinet picks. I'm Julie Gunlock, sitting in for Larry alongside Hans von Spakovsky. Good morning, Hans.
Good morning.
Joining us now is Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Julie. Good morning, Hans. Good to be with you both.
So, Tom, a young man named Luigi Mangione was arrested yesterday in a McDonald's for the alleged assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. Tom, why in just 12 or so hours do we know more about this guy than the kid who tried to kill President Trump? I can't get over the fact that there are so many details coming out about this guy, and yet we really just don't really know much about the Trump's assassin.
Well, you know why? Because the local police are involved. To the degree we know anything up in Butler, in my view, in terms of what took place, it's because local police released documents to groups like Judicial Watch.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with the local police in Pennsylvania. If the FBI had arrested this man, we wouldn't know jack about what he had done. There'd probably no details much about him. But obviously he has a bigger social media footprint than the other man had done. My chief concern is why it is several months later we don't have any information about the Butler investigation. And to me, that's, again, an indication that the FBI can't be trusted to tie their own shoes because they just simply refuse to disclose ordinary information to the American people about their activities.
Shame.
I'm assuming, Tom, you probably would urge Kash Patel, when he hopefully gets confirmed in the FBI, to rehire FBI whistleblowers who've been fired or those who are still working there or have been set aside and put upon, that they get promoted. I mean, wouldn't that be a great result alone from the election?
Yeah, because the FBI isn't serious about protecting whistleblowers, and I encourage all your listeners to go over to Chuck Grassley's website, the senator from Iowa, the incoming chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. He wrote a scathing letter to Wray, basically saying, "I don't trust you. My confidence in you was shattered," and he listed all these egregious violations of public trust, including his contempt for the rights of whistleblowers. So protecting whistleblowers, transparency, those are the core things that Kash should be doing when he becomes FBI director.
Well, speaking of FBI directors, there's a rumor out there that Christopher Wray is preparing to resign. What are your thoughts? Do you think he'll do that?
Yeah, I do think he'll do that. Although Wray is arrogant enough to think he probably could have convinced Trump to keep him in, so who knows if he'll just wait it out and end up getting fired. But on the other hand, as Trump mentioned the other day, and I don't know how Wray could even look Trump in the eye, given what he did to him.
Yeah.
Raiding his home with no basis, just obviously treating Trump as a target and an enemy while protecting every Democrat that came across his desk.
And going up to Capitol Hill and pretending that Trump didn't get shot. Let's not forget that.
Yeah, Trump got a little angry about that, and rightly so. And the sort of casual way in which he allowed Americans to be investigated and targeted simply because they were either Catholic or pro-life or spoke out against the Biden administration. There's got to be accountability at that FBI. I tell you, the FBI, and I only half jokingly say this, I think Kash Patel should be the last FBI director. That's how outrageous and irredeemably corrupt I think that agency is.
Tom, let me ask you a question about something else that I know Judicial Watch does. I mean, you all made headlines just a couple of years ago because you stepped in to where the Justice Department wouldn't go, and you sued Los Angeles County under the National Voter Registration Act because they wouldn't clean up their voter rolls, and I think you got them to agree to take, what was it, like $1.5 million?
Yeah, $1.2 million, I think. Yeah.
Off the voter rolls. I'm assuming you're hoping that with a new Justice Department that you all won't have to spend your time and money doing that, and that finally the Justice Department will go after recalcitrant jurisdictions like L.A.
Yeah, I hope they'll provide us some help because the Justice Department refuses to enforce the law that the states take reasonable steps to clean up the voter rolls for reasons that won't surprise anyone who follows the left, because they don't believe in clean elections. And the great news yesterday was that Harmeet Dillon is going to be head of the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, which, correct me if I'm wrong, Hans, is the section of the Justice Department responsible for maintaining and upholding the rule of law on elections. Great decision. And we need to help. Millions of names. I mean, we just sued California again. Millions of names need to be cleaned up in California and Oregon, Illinois, cases where we're pursuing. But other states simply aren't doing the basics and making sure the rolls are clean. And dirty election rolls can mean dirty elections. We cleaned up 4 million names in the last year, 2 years or so. Imagine what the government could do if they got into the business of actually doing it.
Tom, we've got a few more questions for you. Can you stick around for another segment?
Sure.
Great. We've got more coming up. It is 7:43. We are joined by Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch and author of The Rights and Freedoms in Peril. Hans, I know you had some follow-up questions.
Yeah, Tom, we know the abusive lawsuits filed by Jack Smith. The federal ones are gone, but we still have that meritless prosecution hanging on down in Fulton County with Fani Willis. Now, I know Judicial Watch has been trying to get out of the White House and Fani Willis's offices the communications and information about the coordination that apparently went on between Fani Willis's office and the White House. What's the latest on that?
Well, we had sued, right? And they basically ignored the lawsuit, went into default, and she was supposed to turn over the communications last night or by yesterday. Instead, she said, we can't have any of it because it's all exempted. And, previously she had told us, for instance, there were no communications between her office and the January 6th committee, the Pelosi operation. But then last night she said, oh, by the way, we do have it, but you can't have any of it because it's non-public, because it's all attorney-client and law enforcement sensitive, et cetera.
So first she lied, and now she claims, it's privileged. I mean, that's basically the status.
We lost.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We have to push back in court and see what else we can get. But this is now the fourth chance she's had to search for documents and give them to us. And I don't know what the court's going to think about her latest contempt for, in my view, the rule of law, hiding records about a case that is dead in the water, effectively.
Yeah, but Tom, I'm glad. I think we had lost you there for a second. I was afraid maybe because we were talking about the FBI and the White House that they were trying to cut off our communications with you.
That wouldn't surprise me these days.
Well, Tom, I want to also ask you your thoughts on the Daniel Penny acquittal. Obviously, a big sigh of relief, and many of us watching that case were very nervous, particularly on Friday when the judge allowed the jury to consider the lesser charge. Were you surprised by the verdict?
Well, I was pleasantly surprised because it looked to me like they had cornered the jury into a guilty verdict by, without getting into the technical side of it, basically making it impossible for the jury to get out with anything other than a guilty verdict, given the fact they deadlocked on the bigger charge of manslaughter. This is a case that should never have been brought. And, to me, this is part of the piece of Alvin Bragg's politicization of his office and the politicization of the Soros-backed prosecutors generally. They're soft on crime when people are being harmed, target those who try to help like Penny, and then go after political, people based solely on politics like Donald Trump. So Penny and Trump are in the same boat. Penny got off. Trump yet hasn't, but hopefully the rule of law will hold Alvin Bragg accountable there, too.
Tom, it was interesting. Everybody's been speculating about the jury. The one thing I haven't heard people talk about is, I'd be willing to bet you that just about everybody on that jury, except maybe the exception, the one person that caused the deadlock, are all riders of mass transit in New York. And all of them who found him innocent have been faced with the kind of situation that Daniel Penny was faced. And I suspect that they were very sympathetic to him and were glad, given their own experiences, that someone stepped up and did something about it, since there was no subway security or anybody else there to do anything about it.
I tell you, there isn't a rider of a major city transit system in the country that is insensitive to this. And my guess is there are a lot of smart Democrats who are thanking their lucky stars that Penny was acquitted because one of the reasons the left lost big last election was because of their embrace of this soft on crime agenda. So this is, hopefully something that allows folks like Eric Adams to kind of be more aggressive in taking on the crime in his city, even though he's a Democrat. I think we need normalcy in the Democratic Party because it's deadly dangerous what they're doing now to citizens across the land.
Well, Tom, you're absolutely right. Thank you for joining us. And listen to our listeners. Tom has a great book, Rights and Freedoms in Peril. It is Christmas. That would make a great gift. So, Tom, thank you for
Thank you.
thanks for joining us. It is 7:53.